I was saying y'all, it's your boy Rico from StreetScores, and I know y'all saw the Myles Garrett trade request. We're going to dive into why the Washington Commanders make the most sense for a Myles Garrett trade destination. And you're not just hearing that from me, you're hearing that from multiple trustworthy sources, multiple national media members, NFL analysts, all of these type of guys that are in the industry. I'm going to bring those up as well and tell you exactly who's saying what. Also, we have the second highest odds to trade for Myles Garrett right now, and that's according to two different betting odds books. Also, I'm gonna give y'all a big time realistic trade package on top of a lot of other trade packages that people have thrown out there. We're gonna try to comb through all of them to see which ones make the most sense. And also, we gotta dive into why the Washington Commanders should even trade for a Myles Garrett and why Myles Garrett would want to be traded to the Commanders. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, and still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you be on the lookout for constant content, man. I'm telling you, daily uploads, even some days trying to get back to my 2-3 videos a day when I'm less busy. Make sure you stay tuned because I have so many things to update y'all about. I have so many different windows and tabs of a lot of different video ideas and things I want to tell y'all and break down, but more breaking news just keeps coming out and that always takes the forefront. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. Without further ado, let's go and dive into this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so I literally even organized this video in different sections. I have a what is going on section, which we're going to start with. Then we're going to talk about how all of this started. We're going to go back a couple of months to see where you could even see the signs of this eventually blowing up to this point with Myles Garrett. Then we're going to talk about, are the Browns even willing to trade him? What are we even talking about if the Browns aren't willing to trade him? We're going to talk about why they will be. Then also we got to talk about why the Browns will trade him. We're going to also talk about why the Washington Commanders would love to get Myles Garrett. We're also going to talk about why Myles Garrett would love to join the Washington Commanders. And then we're also going to talk about his contract situation. Then we're going to dive into trade packages and the most important realistic one as well. And then we're also going to finish up with other teams trying to trade for him as well. But why the Washington Commanders are still the team on top as the most likely destination that makes the most sense. Now let's dive into it. All right, so again, starting with what's going on. Well, breaking news, reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year and Brown star edge rusher Myles Garrett has officially requested a trade. His exclusive statement that he put out with the trade requested, he said, as a kid dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, and that goal fuels me today more than ever. My love for the community of Northeast Ohio and the incredible fan base of the Cleveland Browns has made this one of the toughest decisions of my life. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man I am today. While I've loved calling this city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It was always to compete and win for a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I've requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. Signed, Myles Garrett. And I mean, if there was ever a goodbye, if there was ever, I've already mentally moved on, go ahead and make this trade happen, because I'm already saying goodbye to the fans. I'm already letting y'all know that this was a very tough and difficult decision for me, but I'm already past that threshold and there's no going back mentally and emotionally. I've already let go. I've already moved on. It was worded perfectly to that point that, like, I just don't see him going back. Now, we're going to talk about why the Browns, especially their general manager, is being hard-headed and saying that he doesn't plan on trading Myles Garrett at all. But, man, Myles Garrett seems pretty stuck on this. And, man, when I tell you this offseason is about to be fun, man, we have Myles Garrett requesting a trade, and this is before even the Super Bowl has happened. Then out of nowhere, you have the Rams saying that they're about to go ahead and trade Cooper Kupp against his will. He wants to stay with the Rams, and the Rams are like, nah, we're good. We're going to go ahead and move on from Cooper Kupp. But it's crazy because I've already done videos just weeks ago talking about Cooper Kupp and Myles Garrett and while they're likely to be traded, and now you're seeing the Rams on their end saying, yeah, we're trying to get rid of Cooper Kupp, and then Myles Garrett on his end saying, I'm trying to get out of Cleveland right now. And then on top of all of that, the reason why this is going to be really fun as a Commanders fan is because we picked the right time to be 5, man. We picked the perfect time when everything is just lawless to just go ahead and be, hey, we're the top trade and free agency destination in the NFL right now. Go ahead and pull up. And then shouts out to Matt Miller because he does bring up a good point. The NBA tried to steal the NFL's thunder yesterday. Today, the best defensive player in the NFL requests a trade. Now, of course, I mean, I love Myles Garrett and I love the NFL, but it's hard to really compete with Luka for the steal. This is like as close as the NFL can get, especially if the trade ends up going through. If Myles Garrett ends up actually getting traded, then that's as close as we could get. But Luka and LeBron together, Luka for AD is crazy. And now I saw some report about the Warriors trying to get LeBron. It's madness over there. It's madness everywhere. NBA, NFL right now, it's hard not to at least check your phone or check Twitter or whatever like every few or so couple of hours or even few or so minutes. We'll see though. But then immediately after the Myles Garrett announcement about requesting a trade, shouts out to Jordan Schultz because he said an unprompted text from a high-level NFL executive, quote, "I'd give up 2 first-round picks and more to land Myles Garrett." So now you see why it's an arms race to go and get the guy, because out of nowhere, a high-level NFL executive, as soon as everybody heard about the Myles Garrett trade request, just went ahead and sent Jordan Schultz a text like, hey, this is what I'd be willing to give up for him. And I'm pretty sure there are other NFL top executives around that are probably even willing to give up more than that. And now let's go all the way back. Let's take a step back and see how all of this started. Well, first of all, back on December 20th of 2024, towards the end of last season, Daniel Oyefusi, I hope that's how you pronounce that name. I'm sorry if I butchered it. I believe he's a Cleveland Browns reporter. He tweeted throughout the season, Browns defensive end Myles Garrett has said he wants to finish his career in Cleveland. But today, again, as in December 20th, he added, quote, "I'm not trying to rebuild. I'm trying to win right now, and I want that to be apparent when the season is over and we have those discussions. I want them to be able to illustrate that for me so that can be something I can see in the near future, because that's all we want to do," unquote. And then even Mary Kay Cabot, I hope the Cabo, however you pronounce that last name, sorry for that one as well. She even backed up the tweet by saying, "I've never heard Myles Garrett talk like this in his 8-year career here." He said he might want out if the Browns can't show him their plan for winning now. He said, quote, I plan to make plans myself, unquote. And then there was an article written on December 21st by a Cleveland Browns reporter. Myles Garrett might want out if the Browns can't show him a plan for winning now. "I'm not trying to rebuild," was the exact quote. And then fast forward to January 6th from December 20th, superstar pass rusher Myles Garrett reportedly met with Cleveland's front office this week to learn more about the team's plan to avoid a full rebuild. So they pulled up and was like, okay, you're saying you want a plan? Here's our plan. Per ESPN, if the Browns don't have a clear path to contention in the eyes of Myles Garrett, don't be surprised if he tries to join another team. Again, this was back on January 6th. And then fast forward down to January 28th, still just a few days ago. It was reported that the Browns will not be trading star pass rusher Myles Garrett this offseason, not even for 2 first-round picks, said GM Andrew Berry. The team is open to signing an extension with Myles Garrett as well. Basically, I will pay you more to stay if that's what it takes. Garrett says he wants a clear path to contention in Cleveland and doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. And I'm not going to lie, paying him more money is actually the opposite of what he wants. He wants a great team around him so he can contend for Super Bowls. If you pay him more money, that's less money you can pay the team around him better. So right now, the Browns are stuck in an ugly situation where they can't win. The solution is also the problem. It's crazy. So now we got to dive into, are the Browns willing to trade him? Again, the most recent thing that we heard was the Browns GM back on January 28th saying, I wouldn't even trade him for 2 first-round picks. Now, suddenly today, February 3rd, Myles Garrett is like, I don't care. Get me out of here. Now, again, let's dive into whether the Browns are willing to trade him or not. Diving into an article, shouts out to the NFL TradeRumors.com, Logan Ulrich for this one. He said this is a bit of a plot twist, as Garrett had previously indicated he had good conversations with the team brass about his future in Cleveland and wanted to stay, just like a couple of weeks ago. Browns GM Andrew Berry recently said that he wouldn't trade Garrett even if a team offered 2 first-round picks. I mean, would you trade him for 2 first-round picks and a third? You know what I'm saying? He didn't say that. The star pass rusher remains under contract, so it will be interesting to see how things shake out from here. It's worth noting Garrett has just 2 more years on his contract, and the market has moved since he signed his deal. So he is up for a significant raise. Barry and the Browns had indicated previously they were planning to work on an extension for him soon. But that's not the problem. It's not the money. I mean, everything's always about the money, but he's talking Super Bowls right now. Garrett, 29, and which is why he's probably talking about Super Bowls, because he's going to be 30 eventually. And, you know, after you cross that line of being 30, who knows? We'll see. And to continue on, they continue saying, Garrett, 29 years old, is a former first-round pick of the Browns back in 2017. He finished his 3rd year of his 4-year, $30.4 million fully guaranteed contract and was set to make a base salary of $4.61 million for the 2020 season when he agreed to a 5-year extension worth $125 million with the Browns. He is currently under contract for 2 more seasons, and he was a $20 million cap hit in 2024. Now he's going to be a $19.7 million cap hit in 2025 and a $20 million cap hit in 2026. What? That's easy money. If anything, that makes it to where the Browns probably even charge more in return for a trade because Myles Garrett's contract has that much value. Arguably the best defensive player in the entire NFL, and he's only making $20 million a year? Come on now. And shouts out to Eric Edholm of NFL Network. He says Garrett signed a 5-year, $125 million extension in 2020, leaving 2 years left on the deal. His contract salary cap hits at nearly $20 million, then a little over $20 million in 2025 and 2026 respectively. Garrett is due a roster bonus though worth $5 million on the 5th day of the league year on March 16th. The Browns have been fairly competitive for most of Garrett's run in Cleveland, although they have made the postseason only twice in this time with the team. Things bottomed out last season as Cleveland dropped to 3-14, even with Garrett leading the NFL with 22 tackles for loss in just 1 year after an 11-win campaign with the league's top-ranked defense. Now in his time in Cleveland might be nearing an end. I mean, it sure looks like it from my point of view. But again, the Browns have made it clear they're not interested in trading Myles Garrett, and Mike Garafolo even said, I don't expect that to change even after this, but Garrett is making it clear where he stands. To me, it sounds like we have ourselves an old-fashioned standoff, don't we? You know what I'm saying? It sounds like neither side is budging right now. We'll see who breaks first. And then shouts out to Ari Marov. He pointed out the fact that reporter to Browns GM Andrew Berry just last week literally asked him, quote, if someone sees you at dinner and says, we'll give you 2 first-round picks for Myles, do you say I'm not interested, unquote? And then again, the general manager said, correct. You can put that on record, unquote. So that's why we know apparently the Browns are not willing to give up Myles Garrett even for 2 first-round picks. But again, my point is, how about 2 first-round picks, a third, and a player? You know what I'm saying? What we talking? And then today, after the official trade request from Myles Garrett settled down for a couple of hours, there was another report that came out from Jeremy Fowler. He said, source on the Browns stance amid Myles Garrett's trade request, nothing has changed. Team has said publicly it has no plans for trade Myles Garrett away, and then they reaffirmed that later on, like a couple of hours after this Myles Garrett trade request. But I'm gonna keep telling y'all, I may say this multiple times in this video, we gotta remember that this is the same team that traded for Deshaun Watson. Anything is possible. I do not care what they say out loud. These are things that they're supposed to say out loud. If they just go around and say, yeah, Myles Garrett wins, we're gonna go ahead and trade him, we lose, we give up, they would never say that out loud. You know what I'm saying? They would look crazy. They look crazy for trading for Deshaun Watson, but hey, that didn't stop them from doing that. Anything is possible with this team. I don't care what they say out loud to the media. They could be, I mean, as many calls as they probably already got today. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how this goes. Or at the very least, we got to wait until probably the legal tampering period. But I'm sure that phone will be ringing off immediately now or as soon as that tampering period goes off. I mean, the first second. Now let's talk about why the Browns will actually end up trading Myles Garrett away. I just told y'all all of the reasons that they said they will not. But let's dive into why they actually will. Well, first of all, this is now multiple times that Myles Garrett has voiced serious frustration with the Browns in just a matter of a couple of months. Like we just dove through the whole entire history of this going all the way back to December, and he's had time to let the season sink in and chill, and he's mad again. So this is like a real permanent thing right now. This isn't just off of some emotions from a fresh loss like the season just ended. Like, this has been weeks since the season has been finished, at least for the Browns. So you know he means it. I mean, he's had time to literally sit down, make sure he gets perfect clarity, make a calm, collected decision, and this is the conclusion he's come up with, requesting a trade. And if he wants to leave that bad, it might not even be worth trying to rectify the situation that can't be fixed on the Browns' end right now. The Browns are not about to suddenly become Super Bowl contenders over the offseason, right? And without that, I don't see how they can convince Myles Garrett to happily stay. He wants out. He doesn't care about the money. Again, like I already said, I feel like if anything, paying him more money literally does the exact opposite of what he's asking you to do. I mean, of course, making more money heals all wounds, but you're literally paying him the money that he wants for you to go and pay somebody else to please make me a Super Bowl contender. Now, shouts out to Ted Seth because he brings up a good point. Does anybody actually even have a data set for how often a player actually gets traded when they actually request a trade? But shouts out to Bangers and Mash on Twitter because he brings up a good point. There's no way that a guy pens a goodbye letter to fans and then accepts playing through another rebuild for multiple years. I just don't see it. And shouts out to Daniel Jeremiah. He said on Twitter, if I'm Cleveland, I would do my best to collect as many future draft picks as possible. Don't swing for the fence on picks in this draft. I think that's a good point. Go for those 2026 picks. I'll talk about that a little bit later. John Legend also brought up a great point. He said Browns fans might not see it this way right now, but Myles Garrett is actually massively helping their franchise by doing this. They weren't going to be competitive in the rest of his prime at all. They're going to literally waste it at this point in trajectory that they're on right now. And trading him can net them tons of assets to be really competitive when he's declining. So they basically, John Legend's point is y'all end up trading Myles Garrett, and by the time Myles Garrett is not even necessarily good anymore, because y'all not going to be good while he's good, but once he starts to finally decline, once age starts to actually catch up with him, by then y'all will be really good, and it'll be a situation where like who got the last laugh type of thing. So ultimately, from even the Browns standpoint, it makes sense for them to go ahead and trade him. And then later on in the day, it was also confirmed by Jeremy Fowler that Myles Garrett trade request isn't a ploy for a new contract. So just to let you know, out of any report that I've given you, any update from a trustworthy source so far in this video, this is the most recent. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said that Myles Garrett trade request is not a ploy for a new contract. It is not about the money like I just hypothesized. In a report on ESPN Sports Center, Jeremy Fowler says Browns defensive end Myles Garrett trade request is not a ploy for a new contract. Fowler notes Cleveland was already willing to sign Garrett to a new deal this offseason, something Andrew Berry confirmed recently, and that Garrett is truly looking to win a Super Bowl, as he said in his official trade request. Clearly, Garrett has significant doubts about the Browns' ability to contend in the future. Everybody does. I'm pretty sure even they do. They just won't admit it out loud. A source even told Fowler that if the Browns were super aggressive this offseason and sunk a lot of money into the roster, it wouldn't change Garrett's stance. He adds this locks the two sides into a standoff that could drag on for a long time. So basically, Myles Garrett is like, I'm not budging. We'll see if the Browns budge, but we know Myles Garrett is done. He's officially moved on from the Cleveland Browns, at least mentally and emotionally. Now just physically he needs to get traded, but he's done. He basically said, I don't care how much money y'all try to spend. Y'all have had 8 years to spend as much money as you could. And then the one time y'all went and spend crazy money, I spent it on the wrong guy and Deshaun Watson. I'm sick of it. I don't care. I've already said my goodbyes. I've already mentally and emotionally moved on. You cannot bring me back. You can force my body to stay, but you will not force my mind or my heart to stay. That's what it basically looks like. So we'll see how this ends up going. But I just really think if honestly on the Browns end of things, you would be wise to trade him. Of course, trade away a top 5 player. You're never going to get a top 5 player in return, but you would be wise to go ahead and move on from this guy as soon as possible. I'm not going to lie. And then shouts out to Deanna Rossini. She said another GM just texted, quote, the Raiders should consider trading for Myles Garrett to pair him up with Miles Crosby, unquote. And that's interesting, but John Legend has the exact same thoughts that I had as soon as I saw that tweet. He replied to it and said, Myles Garrett made it very clear in his statement that his goal in asking for this trade is to go win a Super Bowl. Everyone's going to pay him whatever he wants. It's not about the money, though. It's about winning a title. So the teams he'll be interested in will be the good teams. not the Raiders, basically. And then shouts out to Jordan at Washington Today. He said the Commanders are on the list of contending teams right now. We are. We were just in the NFC Championship. How can you deny that? Myles Garrett should want to play for a team like this if the goal is to win a championship. And half the AFC is already eliminated, as the Browns likely wouldn't trade him within the conference. I know I wouldn't if I were the Browns. I know we've talked about maybe Micah Parsons pulls up and joins the Commanders. But again, the reason against that was, why would the Cowboys allow Myles Garrett to go within not only the conference but the division? Same thing here with Myles Garrett. You see Lamar Jackson saying that he wants for him to pull up to the Ravens. Not gonna happen. If he ends up leaving, it's gonna more than likely be to an NFC team, an NFC contending team with, I mean, remember, the Commanders have the third most cap space in the NFL. So even though it's not necessarily about the money, we can make it about the money. Oh yeah, we can make it about the money for sure. And this is also a deep defensive line class. Let me just take some time to point this out. Like, I know there is no Myles Garrett in this defensive line class, especially edge rusher and everything. But when is there? First of all, let's start there. No matter who you win or who you trade Myles Garrett for, no matter when you trade him, whatever, you're not going to get a Myles Garrett in return. It's like trading away Kevin Durant or LeBron. Like, you're not going to get Kevin Durant or LeBron in return. You just got to make the most of what you can get. Just like the AD trade from the Pelicans to the Lakers, you just got to make the most of it. And to that point, this is a good draft to try and at least get an edge rusher that can start and be good for you immediately and with some high upside. Again, there's no Myles Garrett in this draft, but you can get a really good edge rusher late in the first round with the pick that you would probably trade him for, and use other picks and cap space to improve the rest of the team around whatever else you're trying to build going on. So if there was ever a draft to trade Myles Garrett for picks in, it would honestly be this one, especially to trade for some 2026 picks, because I believe, me personally, Rico of StreetScores, that ultimately that the Browns would end up trying to go for draft capital in return that would ultimately put them in the best position to get a franchise quarterback in next year's draft, the 2026 draft. We're talking about the Mannings and the Allars and those type of guys. And so I see them doing whatever they can to accumulate as much draft capital 2025 wise, but especially 2026 wise as well, so that they can go big on fixing their quarterback problem. Get rid of Deshaun Watson, get that cap space and that cap hit off your total cap space, and then go ahead and get your franchise quarterback. Go ahead and lose in 2025 so you can have your own high first round draft pick, and getting rid of Myles Garrett will definitely help you achieve having a first overall pick. I can tell you that would be a very productive move right there, even on the Browns end. Get rid of Myles Garrett. Now you have no choice to end up with the first overall pick. I mean, y'all couldn't win even with them. Imagine how bad y'all would lose without them. And then not only will you have your own high draft picks, but you'll also have another team's, more than likely, again, I feel like the Commanders' first round picks, which will more than likely be late first round picks, but either way, it's still first round picks. And then you can put all of that draft capital together and do whatever you got to do to, even if you don't have the first overall pick, you can trade up into the first overall pick to get the quarterback that you want, if that's what you want to do. And I mean, edge rushers are great, but quarterback is the most important position in football. And if Myles Garrett doesn't want to come back anyway, you would be wise to go ahead and do whatever you got to do to flip Myles Garrett into a top-tier franchise quarterback. Look what Jaden Daniels just did for the Washington Commanders. I'm not expecting another Jaden Daniels to come out of the draft just out of nowhere. Everybody's looking for a Jaden Daniels, but hey, you at least got to try. And also, now it's time to talk about why Myles Garrett would love to go to the Washington Commanders specifically. Not even just leave the Browns, but go to the Commanders specifically. Shouts out to Grant Paulson, because I completely agree. He said, I'm just looking for an ascending and attractive destination of a team with lots of cap space and a massive need for an impact edge rusher. Sounds like the Commanders to me. Shouts out to Jamal, my boy at Let Maul Tell It. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube and everything, man. Trap or Die Podcast. He said on Twitter, Myles Garrett not trying to go through another rebuild or retool in Cleveland when they aren't even showing a plan for their offense besides committing another year to an injury-prone shell of a quarterback in Deshaun Watson. So why would he even stay right now? And then now you even have Chris Sims. Everybody's doing their videos talking about what are the top trade destinations for Myles Garrett. What makes the most sense? Chris Sims brought up a lot of teams, but most notably, when he talked about the Commanders, he sounded pretty convincing. Same with Trevor Trevor Sycamore on the NFL Draft Stock Exchange show on YouTube, where he picked the Commanders as one of his 5 teams that make the most sense. And when he talked about us, when he was talking about all the teams and things like that, when he got to the Commanders, it sounded like he was leaning towards us making the most sense, especially just because of cap space wise. Then you even have Walter Football. He said the Redskins have the 3rd most cap space in the NFL. They also have a big need for edge rusher. They would be a scary team with Garrett joining their defensive line. And then even on top of that, shouts out to Brett Coleman, not a Commanders reporter, fan, or nothing. I believe he's a Steelers fan from what I remember, or Texans or something like that. Absolutely no affiliation or bias towards, against, or for the Commanders in any way. He tweeted, "Let's just speculate for a second that Myles Garrett does get traded. If we want to talk destination, the Commanders seem like the most likely option to me. They have the cap flexibility, position need, and they probably feel that their picks are low in the rounds anyway, so they'd be willing to give them away." So, hey, man, if Brett Coleman says it, I believe it, especially when it's in favor of us right now. Of course, I'm biased to believe it, but I mean, you have people that are not even attached to the Commanders in any way saying the Washington Commanders make the most sense. And it's not even just reporters and national analysts. You have the betting odds as well. According to Sports Betting AG, the Washington Commanders right now have the 2nd highest odds of trading for Myles Garrett at plus 500, only behind the Dallas Cowboys somehow at plus 400. I don't understand the Cowboys one. Right now, they have the Cowboys 4-1, the Commanders 5-1, Chiefs 6-1, Raiders 7-1, 49ers 8-1, Eagles 9-1, and then the Bills and Green Bay Packers both at 10-1. But that's not just it. Shouts out the Sportsbook Review. And then FanDuel, they have the Raiders plus 280, and then the Commanders again second at plus 320 odds. So right now, we are the only consistent team in the top couple of teams of every betting odds board that you can find right now, and we're number 2 in both, because you have the Dallas Cowboys number 1 according to Sports Betting AG, but then when you go to FanDuel's odds, the Cowboys are like 9th. And then when you're looking at the Sportsbook Review of FanDuel, the Raiders are first over us. Okay, that's cool. But then when you go to Sports Betting AG, the Raiders are 4th. You know what I'm saying? We're the only consistent top 2 in the betting odds, no matter which book you look for, is my point. And then you even have the 33rd team. They did an article, the 4 trade destinations for the Cleveland Browns edge rusher Myles Garrett. Shouts out to Tyler Brook for this one. And then in his 4 spots, when he talks about the Commanders, you can tell they feel like we make the most sense out of any of the other spots. They mentioned the Green Bay Packers, they mentioned the New England Patriots, and they also mentioned the Detroit Lions. But for us, they said there isn't another team in a better position to take a swing on a future Hall of Famer than the Washington Commanders. Thanks to Jaden Daniels being on a rookie deal for the next 5 seasons, the Commanders have more financial flexibility than almost every other NFL franchise. They have more than $78 million in cap space, and after making into the NFC Championship, they'll be incentivized to take some big swings this offseason to build a contender around their new franchise quarterback. And on top of the financial flexibility, the Commanders are desperate for impact players on defense. The Commanders rank 23rd in defensive DVOA, and only 2 players on the roster, Dante Fowler and Frankie Louvu, have more than 5 sacks this past season. Garrett will be an instant impact player to lead Washington's pass rush, opening up the rest of the defense for Dan Quinn. Which now takes me to the point of why the Commanders would love to have Myles Garrett. We keep seeing people talk about why the Commanders are arguably the best and most logical trade destination for Myles Garrett, because we have the most cap space, but you've also seen them mention that we're desperate for an edge rusher like Myles Garrett. We need that. I mean, before we even dive into why the Commanders would love Myles Garrett, even just off the head schematically, Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. would love nothing more than to rush the passer and to consistently get pressure on the quarterback by only sending 4 defensive linemen, and you have all of the other 7 guys back in coverage. The reason that we really sucked in coverage this past year is because we couldn't get pressure on the quarterback with only just 4 guys. We had to send so many guys blitzing all of the time that we left our corners and safeties on islands that other teams don't have to necessarily do. Shouts out to the Eagles. Their DBs aren't in difficult situations like our DBs were this last year, because their front 4 led by those Georgia Bulldogs, you know what I'm saying, not to toot my own horn, but they're so dominant defensively on that line that you can have 7 guys back in coverage, and then those 4 defensive linemen are going to get pressure on the quarterback consistently enough. The Commanders couldn't do that, so we left our DBs on islands, whereas the Eagles are typically covering every receiver running a route with 2 guys out there, with a linebacker in a corner and a safety. Poor Terry McLaurin. I mean, people keep hyping up Quinyon Mitchell, and he's a good corner, but the Eagles always shaded their defense towards Terry. There was always some extra help there to where Quinyon Mitchell always had some sort of leverage on Terry to the outside, and he knew he always had inside help. We can start to do those things if we have a Myles Garrett on our defensive line to help get consistent pressure on the quarterback. And I know Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. would love that to get, because I mean, they're the guys that had Micah Parsons for the last 3 years. And that's why they were able to turn the Cowboys into the best takeaway defense in the NFL for 3 years straight, while Dan Quinn was their defensive coordinator and Joe Wood Jr. was their defensive passing game coordinator. Micah Parsons was the catalyst for that whole thing. Without Micah Parsons, they would not have been able to do that. Shouts out to Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland, but without Micah Parsons, it wouldn't be possible at all. It wouldn't even be close. And I know Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. are itching for another version of Micah Parsons. I'm telling you that right now. So, in my opinion, this is the player that you do whatever it takes to get. I mean, I love Max Crosby. I love a lot of these other names that we're attached to with Garrett Wilson. Maybe if you even want to throw Cooper Kupp in there. Khalil Mack. We have a lot of names that we're attached to in free agency and trade destinations and things like that. T. Higgins, all of these guys. But Myles Garrett is the one guy that if I had to pick out of all of the names that we could possibly go get in free agency or trade for, Myles Garrett is my #1 target. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Shouts out to my boy Rio Robinson over there. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Subscribe to him on YouTube. Shouts out to my dog Rio. Brings up a great point too. He said Eagles traded for A.J. Brown and Darius Slay while simultaneously constructing a roster around their young quarterback. Please kindly shut up, of course he cussed, about trading for an elite top 5 player stopping the development of a young talent. I hate people bringing up that point. I really do. And then shouts out to J.P. Finley for bringing up a couple of points. First one, he said, while Adam Peters was a part of the 49ers brain trust, San Francisco traded for Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey. And then in his first year in Washington, Peters traded for Marshawn Lattimore. Basically, Adam Peters is not scared to trade for star players. So if you're worried about, well, maybe the Commanders won't do it, you know what I'm saying? Adam Peters has shown he's willing to do whatever it takes to make his team better. And then shouts out to JP Finley for this as well. He said, call about Myles Garrett. Immediately, actually. He doesn't miss games. At least 14 sacks in the last 4 seasons. Ridiculous production. But for all of the excitement, keep in mind Myles Garrett has no guaranteed money left on his deal and is making about $10 million less than Nick Bosa per year. This could be really just about a new contract. We'll see inevitably, but I highly doubt it. Again, Myles Garrett went ahead and said that it's about a Super Bowl, point blank, period. Shouts out to Jeremy Fowler. He said the term generational talent gets thrown around a lot. This is a generational talent, now hoping to land with a new team. That's why the Washington Commanders should do whatever it takes to get him. I mean, let's break this down. With 8 seasons, 117 games, doesn't miss many games, a very durable guy. And that's already has some very high on my list of targets in this offseason as far as trades and free agency, because even as much as I love T. Higgins, you got to depend on him. You got to just assume he's going to be out for at least 4 to 6 games in a year. Even Khalil Mack, he's been really healthy ultimately, but he's getting up there in age. You're not exactly sure how available he'll be just off of the fact that he's getting older, even though he has been very durable the past 3 seasons. I think he's only missed 1 game the last 3 seasons total, but Myles Garrett is pretty much as durable as it gets. And he has 352 tackles. He has 116 tackles for loss, 102.5 sacks total so far in his career, 17 passes defended. I mean, can y'all recount even 5 times this past season that we've had defensive linemen bat the ball down at the line of scrimmage when a quarterback's trying to throw the ball? On top of that, he has 20 forced fumbles, 6 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler and a 6-time All-Pro. How do you not want this guy? Shouts out to Mina Combs, too. She said over the last 2 years, Myles Garrett is second league-wide in pass rush win rate, only behind Micah Parsons, despite being doubled 30% of the time. He ranks first in both incompletions and interceptions created through pressure, and is first in forced fumbles. This is easily the best defensive player in the entire NFL. If he's available, go get him. I don't care what it takes. And to reaffirm that, again, like I mentioned earlier, he literally won Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL just 2023. He's technically the reigning champ because we haven't even announced who's won it for 2024 yet. But 2023, he just won it. and he was still elite this season as well. Do not sleep on him. Also, shouts out to Emmanuel Benton. I agree. Washington has a top 5 quarterback on a rookie deal for at least the next couple of seasons. You better take advantage of it. I completely agree. And then shouts out to Corey Woodruff of, I think, the Cleveland Browns. I believe it's a Cleveland Browns reporter. He said the Washington Commanders arrived well ahead of schedule this past season, led by a truly sensational rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. With the future in full focus now, Washington's offense feels pretty complete, even if future luxury additions feel likely in the passing game. Receiver-wise, tight end, we'll see offensive line, maybe especially running back too. The defense will undoubtedly get reinforcements in the draft and free agency, the latter for which the Commanders are well equipped with roughly over $78 million in cap space, third most in the NFL, might I add. Washington has an excellent path this offseason to shore up its roster and contend for the years to come with Daniels at the helm. We're sure a good plan is in place. The Commanders will be a popular place for NFL free agents and a good place for 2025 NFL draft picks to land. However, Monday's news of Cleveland Browns superstar edge rusher Myles Garrett requesting a trade should change the entirety of the Washington's offseason plans. I agree. Forget whatever plans you had. Jumble that all up, ball it up, throw it away. Myles Garrett is now officially your number one priority, and then everything else comes second and after that. Landing Garrett in a trade should become the primary objective for the Commanders. The team should move heaven and earth to get him. I agree. When you think about the game that Washington wants to play, time of possession becomes paramount. This is a good point here. The team was 9th in overall time of possession last season, with offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury scheming up a slippery offense that can absolutely devastate you in the short game and bleed the clock with ease before crashing it in with points. Daniels can burn you with his legs, and his cool-headed decision-making allows him to scan the field and take intermediate yardage to set up those third and shorts where he could just scramble for the first down. Opposing defenses know how it goes, and we're sure they dread it. However, that style of offense is absolutely heightened by a defense that can get opposing offenses off the field quickly. The best way to do that is with a suffocating pass rusher, enter Myles Garrett. Having a truly generational game record coming off the edge for the Commanders will make both their defense and offense better. Washington, you got to think about the fact that how amazing it is that we were 9th in time of possession, and it was not thanks to our defense. That was purely our offense going on ridiculous 17-play, 9-minute scoring drives, like converting 2 4th downs on these drives. If we were winning time of possession battles because our offense was like historically efficient, not because we were playing complimentary football at all. Imagine if the defense gets a part of the program, how crazy it can be. So, continuing on with the article, Washington already has a pair of excellent defensive tackles in Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne that can cause problems in the middle, and the team will probably bring back free agent defensive end Dante Fowler to pair with Dorrance Armstrong coming off the edge. But adding Garrett to that group will turn a stout defensive front into a horrifying one for opposing offensive lines, as Garrett's explosive playmaking style will lead to big moments on his own and open up opportunities for others on the defensive line once Garrett inevitably draws extra attention. And this is separate from the article. I was just thinking about it just randomly as I brought up their names, but maybe you trade away Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne to make this trade go through. I mean, Jonathan Allen, honestly, I was working on a video where Jonathan Allen could end up actually being a cut candidate, where you just straight up cut him. You don't even trade him. You just cut him because it saves you so much cap space that he's barely much like that much of a dead cap hit anyway. You can save so much money by cutting Jonathan Allen. Why not just go ahead and include him in a trade package that would make the Browns better? You lose Myles Garrett, you got worse, period. But at least you could recover a little bit of that value by just maybe we could just send them the Jonathan Allen tape from that Detroit Lions game that we won, and maybe that will force them, that will want them to go ahead and trade for him, because he balled out against the Lions. He wasn't that good against the Eagles, but against the Lions, he was a huge difference maker. We need to send that exact tape and tell him not to watch anything else about Jonathan Allen, and just tell him this is who he is every game, and I'm pretty sure that trade would go through. Washington coach Dan Quinn saw the benefits of having a superstar pass rusher while coaching Micah Parsons with the Dallas Cowboys, and if the Commanders can leverage an enticing trade package to secure Garrett, Quinn would know exactly what to do with him. I completely agree. He had experience with Micah Parsons creating literally the number one takeaway defense in the NFL. Imagine what he could do with Myles Garrett. Garrett will raise the entire floor and ceiling for this defense and make the Commanders a possible NFC favorite for next year. If there's any team that should do whatever it takes to get Garrett, if Cleveland is open to a trade, it's literally the Washington Commanders. Now let's talk about contracts. Well, the Garrett trade would not be very easy for the Browns to work with on their salary cap, because he has been restructured every year to the point that it would cost them $36 million in cap charges if they traded him. Like, trading him away would hit them for $36 million against the cap. So trading him away would actually make them have less cap space than if they just kept him. I mean, he has a bonus due in March as well. Let's break that down. Shouts out to Spot Track. They brought up the fact that new team acquiring him, cap hit non-guaranteed 2025 would be 19.8 million. 2026 non-guaranteed would be 25 million of a cap hit, but the Browns will take on $36 million worth of dead cap with him gone. The 29-year-old will be seeking a deal and is currently projecting towards a 4-year $137 million contract in our system, so be on the lookout. We will have to pay this guy after you trade for him as well. Shouts out to Hayden Hinks because he brings up the fact that the Browns are $30 million over the cap space right now. Trading away Myles Garrett would actually take them up to $46 million over the cap. If they have to do this and punt off an entire offseason of spending, the Deshaun Watson trade somehow looks even worse. That's a good point. So technically on their end, from the Browns end, trading away Myles Garrett actually makes their cap space situation worse. But I mean, when you have a guy that seems like he's as far gone mentally and emotionally as he is, you may have to do what you got to do. That's your fault for ending up in this situation, trading for Deshaun Watson and giving them all of that money in the first place. This is completely on you. Don't take it out on the rest of the league, especially the Commanders. Do what's right. Do what's right, Cleveland. Now let's talk about some trade packages, man. Let's get to it. Shouts out to Theo Ash because he brings up a good point. One of the best players to ever request a trade in NFL history. 2 first-round picks and a player is fair. I can see that. And knowing how good these Commanders are about to be for a long time, I'm assuming that our 2026 first-round pick will be in the late 20s as well, just like we have the 29th pick overall in 2025. We'll give that away. And then our pick in the 2026 first round will probably be somewhere around 29, maybe even 32. We win the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? We'll see how that goes. And so, shouts out to at Commanders Realm because he brings up a good point. Washington finds themselves in uncharted waters with their first round pick. Not only just picking 29th, which is just completely unusual since I've been a fan of the team, since I've been alive, but also not having the glaring need at quarterback that we were so accustomed to each offseason makes the term, quote, trading a first round pick, unquote, not sound as terrifying as usual. Send them first round picks, Commanders, please. Also, shouts out to Jordan Reed. He hypothesizes that 2 firsts should be the starting point on the phone call for a potential Myles Garrett trade. Hang up the phone if they're not. So you got to start with 2 first round picks, at least. Again, general manager of the Cleveland Browns already said you can offer 2 firsts and I'm not even going to accept it. So Jordan Reed is right where he says you got to start with 2 firsts and add on to that. Shouts out to Deanna Rossini. She said one NFL GM on what trade Myles Garrett could look like. That GM said, quote, probably a first and more, but also said, I can't wait for the it will be 3 first round picks crowd because it's not happening. 1 and a 2, 1 and 2 threes, maybe throw a player in there, unquote. So there's a GM around the NFL. You can say whatever you want about all of these different NFL analysts and reporters saying what they think. But when the NFL GM says that they don't think that Myles Garrett is going to go for any type of big trade like 3 first round picks, this NFL GM, anonymous NFL GM said a 1 and a 2 and maybe a 1 and 2 threes or something like that. But not as big of a trade as a lot of people think. Then you have Benjamin Solak. He said Khalil Mack was 27 when the Raiders traded him, and a second for 2 first rounders from the Bears in 2018. Garrett is still only 29 and a clear cut above even prime Khalil Mack. I agree. Think it take 2 firsts and then something on top to get Cleveland to pick up the phone. And so to be more specific, just remember when Khalil Mack was 27 years old, he was traded from Oakland to Chicago. The Bears had to give up 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick and a 6th-round pick to get Khalil Mack and a 2nd-round pick and a conditional fit. We can get creative like that too, man. We saw that Sam Howell trade and how creative that was. Even the Jahan Dotson trade. We got to do what we got to do. You know what I'm saying? Hey, let's make it happen. It ain't got to be just straight up Myles Garrett for 2 first-round picks and maybe something else. It could be we give 2 first-round picks, maybe a mid-round, another late round or something like that, and then y'all give us Myles Garrett along with like a conditional something in the middle or late round. You know what I'm saying? Whatever we got to do, get creative, make it happen. Also, shouts out to Mason Kinahan because he said we haven't seen a player of Myles Garrett caliber in a request for a trade in a very long time, if ever. So it's hard to know exactly what a good package would be for him, but this is what I'm thinking right now if I'm Washington. That's a good point. I mean, there's nothing to compare this to right now. Myles Garrett being available for a trade is unheard of as far as value goes. So we literally have really nothing to compare it to. The Khalil Mack deal is as close as we can get. And again, I would argue, even like Benjamin Solak said, that 29-year-old Myles Garrett is still better than 27-year-old Khalil Mack. So you have to start with that Khalil Mack trade probably. But Mason Kinahan said pick 29, pick 79, and then also a 2026 first and a 2026 third. Plus maybe a guy like Javonte John Baptiste is going to take 2 first-round picks plus more easily. I could definitely see that. Now let's talk about the trade package. Shouts out to the 33rd team because they literally uploaded the entire graphic and everything, as you can see on the screen right now. Again, this is the same website, an article and reporter that said there isn't another team in a better position to take a swing on a future Hall of Famer than the Washington Commanders out of the entire NFL. And their trade package, as you can see, is Myles Garrett for straight up just a 2025 first round pick and a 2026 first round pick. And if that's literally all he's willing to, that the Cleveland Browns are willing to give him up for, I mean, I'll donate to it. Where do I have to send money to make sure this goes through? What do you need me to do to make sure this goes through? Because if that's all that they're asking for, somehow, even after their GM just said that he wasn't, hey man, please, I would have done that trade yesterday. Now let's also, before we get up out of here, talking about other teams that are trying to trade for him. Because shouts out to Mina Khan, she brings up a good point. She said she started to think of teams that will make a call and then realize it's probably easier to make a list of teams who won't call. That's a shorter list. I agree. Shouts out to John Ledger. He said basically every team should be interested in Myles Garrett, but for some of it will be less likely than others. Doubt he gets moved to a non-contender. I agree. Most aggressive teams should be Commanders, number 1, the first team he thought of. Then the Buccaneers, Chargers, Lions, Packers, 49ers, and Cowboys. A lot more NFC teams than AFC teams because, again, they more than likely would not trade him within the conference. John Ledger also replied to an Atlanta fan, because somebody that was an Atlanta fan said, why not Atlanta? They seem very likely with a good young team and Penix taking over full time. Cousins goes back to Stefanski in the deal. Well, John Ledger said, yeah, that might be good, but I'd be pretty surprised if Myles Garrett asked for a trade and then was cool with betting his prime on Michael Penix and an organization that hasn't been super competent lately. Now, granted, Michael Penix does look pretty good, but why would you choose Michael Penix and the Falcons over the Washington Commanders with Jaden Daniels, who just went to an NFC championship? So if I'm Myles Garrett, I'm like, nah, that's not gonna work right there. Make it the Commanders if I'm him. Also, shouts out to Ben Axelrod. He said the Deshaun Watson trade cost the Browns 3 first-round picks, Nick Chubb's prime, and Myles Garrett. No other way to spin it. I mean, that is crazy too, and man, I feel so bad for my Georgia dog, Nick Chubb, man. Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb, y'all got to get up out of there as soon as possible. And then also shouts out to Chick Hernandez, because he said, this is a Commanders reporter, mind you, he said, well, I do know this. It will at least be discussed in Ashburn. We'll see if like an official trade ends up actually being offered, like any type of trade package. But you know for a fact the Washington Commanders are at least talking about it. And then shouts out to Mike Garafolo. He said the Browns are sticking to their stance and do not intend to have any conversations or trade for Myles Garrett so far. And that update was as recently as 11:35 a.m. But again, I'm telling you right now, they can say whatever they want to the media. They can say whatever they want out loud. But I'm pretty sure they're at the very least listening to offers right now. They would be crazy if they didn't. They would absolutely be crazy. And I, again, want to remind you, this is the same team that traded for Deshaun Watson and gave him all of that money. So anything is possible. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stick on that like button, stick on the subscription button, stick on the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinion video just like this one. Of course, any names that are linked to the Washington Commanders, I'm going to have y'all updated. There's a report that the Commanders may be even interested in trading for Kyle Pitts. And with the trade that like whatever trade package that somebody put out there for that one, it would not get in the way for us trading for Myles Garrett. So if you wanted to, you could trade for Myles Garrett and Kyle Pitts. My point is, though, is that I'm keeping y'all updated on every rumor or report concerning the Washington Commanders for this entire offseason, draft, free agency, all of that. Again, I have so many videos I want to talk about. We already have a list of players that the Washington Commanders have met with draft-wise from all of the different bowls, like the Shrine Bowl, Hula Bowl, and even the Senior Bowl and things like that. I can't wait to update y'all on that, so make sure y'all stay tuned, and that's why I'm trying to put out 2-3 videos a day as long as I'm not too busy to do so, because I have so many things I need to talk about. So we have draft, free agency, we're attached to Justin Simmons is apparently available. We have so many things to talk about. I can't wait to get it. I mean, should we even do a video about Cooper Kupp even maybe? So we'll see. So of course, make sure you do not leave this video without leaving a like. If you made it this far in the video, I salute you. But my main point is, please make sure you're always coming back to this channel and checking to see if I put out another video, because I more than likely did since the last time you checked, because there's so many things to talk about. It's ridiculous. It's not a lack of content, it's a lack of time that I'm having. But of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about this whole Myles Garrett thing. I don't even have to break it all the way down right here. Just let me know. Do you want to trade for Myles Garrett? Yes or no? If you are, let me know what you're willing to give up for him. What's the maximum amount of trade value you're willing to give up for Myles Garrett? And if you're not, let me know why you're not willing to give up whatever it takes to get Myles Garrett. Like I feel like, please let me know what your opinions are. If you disagree that we should trade for Myles Garrett, let me know exactly why. Convince me why we should not make that trade. Let me know how you feel about this whole thing. Really appreciate y'all. Again, do not leave this video without leaving a like. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.